All right. So for tonight, we have a really fun program. Gretchen Rupp has put together a photo celebration from all our summer field trips. And if you're a member of our society, you got this guidebook to all our summer field trips back in May. And we had more than 50 member-led field trips around the state this summer, which is very impressive. And I guess it's pretty safe to say that Gretchen Rupp needs little or no introduction to this group. For one, she's been a member of the Montana Native Plant Society since 1987. And then most importantly, she is a two-term past president of our society. So we owe her a real big debt of gratitude for that. So thank you, Gretchen. So with that, I'm going to unshare my screen. And Gretchen can go ahead and
let's see if I can share mine.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I'm emulating what we did 2 years ago. You'll recall that in COVID times, we missed 2 annual meetings, and we really missed them. But we did have some field trips, and so 2 years ago we put together a photo collage of field trips, and I'm sort of following the example from then. I do not have slides from all 50 field trips. I have slides, I think, from 16 field trips. So, and I was only on a very small number of these. So I'm going to just sort of start us into this slideshow, and I'll ask that perhaps either the leader or the photographer from each field trip that we land on unmute yourself and just tell us a tiny bit about the field trip, sort of where it was, how many folks you had, any sort of highlights about the field trip. That would be terrific. So we will start in far northwest Montana. We'll start sort of in spitting distance of British Columbia, and we'll finish up in the extreme southeastern corner of the state. And if the folks on that field trip had adjourned and gone into town for a beer, they would have gone to Camp Crook, South Dakota. So it's quite a range of ecosystems that we'll be looking at here. Lots of folks contributed photographs, and many of these photographs I got secondhand, not from the photographers. So I have done my best, but if I messed up and failed to attribute a glorious photograph to you when it was your photograph, I apologize. You can beat me up in the chat. So Beth has already said that we will have 3 prize breaks in the program. We'll do glacier wildflowers first, a chance for the flora of the Yellowstone second, and last of all, we'll have Montana grasses. Okay, starting in the Northwest, John Rennie, I know that you are here this evening. Do you want to say a word or two about your Lindy Peak field trip?
Sure. This was a short hike. It goes up to an old tree stand lookout that was built not too long after the 1910 fire. The tree stand doesn't look like that right now, by any means. And it's really interesting. You get up on top and you can't see anything because all the trees have grown up. But it's a very nice little hike. My wife and I do it quite often. It's 3.5 miles one way. You get up on a ridge. Part of it was burned about 4 years ago in a wildfire. So seeing the regeneration and the changes of the vegetation, it's kind of interesting. We had, I think, 7 people on the hike this year. Nothing too spectacular that we saw. It was kind of late in the season. But just a nice day to get out, and an easy hike. Those are always fun.
Okay. Oh, there we go. That was your best photograph, John.
Yes, and that was on the side of the road of all places.
And there's your group.
If you can actually still see the pegs that they had drilled into the tree to climb up the tree. It's kind of neat, the
Oh,
history.
wow. We're on to another hike. This one was led by Rosemary McKinnon and Pat Jackwith. Are either of you here to describe your hike to us?
Pat's here.
Oh, Pat, tell us what you did.
Well, first of all, the Lubeck Trail is east of Marias Pass and very high, and it has a tradition of always being windy no matter what else is going on. But an end of the June hike felt more like a March hike. It was freezing cold that day, and you can see we were all bundled, and those who bundled had a wonderful time. And it really didn't rain on us, although it had predicted to. That's Glacier Park right behind us. We were interested in this big daisy type flower and tipped it over so that we could see the backside and identify it.
Oh, very nice.
And the long-bracted orchid was just spectacular in several wet spots. We found several of them. And in a patch of spotted coral root, we found a forma flavida, the gold one, that doesn't have spots on its tongue. So it's not spotted and it's not coral colored, but it is one of the coral roots. The highlight of the trip was finding a lot of pygmy bitterroot. And
It's kind of pale, Pat. Is that just the photograph, or was it?
That was basically what we saw. That they're pretty much what we were looking at. Yeah.
I see. Okay. It's not as vivid as I've seen it.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it was because it was toward the end of their season. I'm not sure.
Uh-huh.
Maybe they'd frozen.
Okay, thank you, Pat. I know that Steve Wirt is not with us this evening. Is there anyone who was on this field trip with Steve up in the Whitefish Range? Like the lady who was smiling at us from that lovely historical lookout? Well, what Steve said to me was that what they looked at Hay Creek was an area that had burned a few years ago, and there wasn't a great deal in bloom. So they went up to this historic lookout on top of the Whitefish Range and poked around up there. And there are a few photographs from that poking. Staying in the far northwest, Teepee Mountain. Peter, are you with us this evening? No, John is, I know.
That's just a hike that Peter got sick on, or he
Oh.
said he got sick and didn't show up.
Oh,
No, he and Rosella did come down with a cold on the morning of the hike, and so they took off and left.
oh, okay, okay.
But we all met them at the store. This is on the ridge between the Kootenai and the Yak River, and we were going to go down toward Teepee Mountain. It had burned in a few years ago. We wanted to get into the burn itself just to look at the difference of the vegetative cover. And going up was really interesting. We did find a lot of huckleberries, so it took quite a while to hike. You know,
Yeah.
how that works. And the one gentleman in the back, right under the sign, he knew a couple of the asters that we didn't. So we were little triple asters, or I just call them triple asters. But we had 3 or 4 of those, so that was interesting to see. And the two gals in the middle, they came up to the area in 1966.
Wow.
Their dad was a doctor from California, and they homesteaded, not really homesteaded, but they bought some property up here. So they've been coming up since 1966, and that was really neat talking with them.
They've seen some changes.
Yes. So there we are, right on the ridge here. That's the thing over to the there. Oh, there's somebody lounging.
I guess there weren't any flower pictures. There were mostly people pictures from that hike. Thank
Yeah.
you, John.
Well, I'll continue on. Then we went to Rainbow Lake later in the year. This was a spot where we had one of the hikes that when the annual meeting was up here, went into here. I had never been here before, so it was quite interesting. The sundew was just phenomenal. I could not believe how much sundew there was, and it was easy to get to also. So that was really nice. I think there's a picture.
We do have a photograph.
There I am, just flabbergasted. That's Betty Curapat. You guys know Betty. Oh, and we saw some Botrychium.
That's also a Botrychium, I guess.
Yeah. There's some sundew. I had been to the lake earlier one spring, and the water was way up, so you couldn't really get out very far. And then when we went, the water was down a ways, and so you could walk out on the mats quite far, and it was all over the place once you start seeing it. So that's cool to know it's out there.
Boy, no kidding. So is that what you would call a floating bog?
Yes and no. I'm not an expert in that area, and I hate to say it, but I kind of think it is, because there were other plants that are common in that area. Oh, sorry, Maria. A fin.
Christy, if you want to just unmute yourself and speak up, that would be great.
Yeah, I can't figure out how to get the chat box open. It's not being cooperative, but I don't think that's roundleaf sundew. I think that's probably Angelica or one of the probably Angelica, Drosera Angelica, or Anglica. I'm pronouncing it wrong. Thank you, Maria.
Okay, thank you, John. Moving south. Here's a Peter Lessica hike. And we have a number of neat flower photos from this one. And Peter is not with us tonight, I take it. Deborah, are you on? Can you describe this, or another person who was on this field trip? No. Okay. So we've got some nice aquatic plants here. Oh, time for a prize break. If you would like to contend for this app, wiggle your cursor around until the icons on the bottom of the screen come up and type into the chat box. Okay. Beth is monitoring that and she will identify the winner to us at the end of the slideshow. Moving on to the area covered by the Calypso chapter, we have a couple of field trips that took place during the annual meeting. And here was one up on Big Hole Pass. Stunningly scenic. So Pat, you're on the call tonight, I know. I don't know if Andrew Smith is. Do you want to talk about this? Well, maybe Pat isn't. If someone wants to comment on any of these slides, go ahead and unmute yourself. You don't have to do it via the chat box. Just identify yourself and speak up. So what I have never understood is why these ambush spiders that wait for bees on flower heads are not blue. You see them on blue flowers and purple flowers, and they're usually yellow. How can that be adaptive?
They actually can change from yellow to white. Those are the two colors they have. I think blue pigment is harder to come by in spiders, but that takes them a few days apparently to make the changeover. And usually when they're on a blue flower, they typically turn white. But so this one must have just crawled up there.
So are they emulating the flower parts, Christy?
They're just camouflaging themselves. I don't think they're necessarily looking like a flower part. I've seen them on the outside of a harebell of all places, just a white one. And sometimes they'll spread their legs out and try to look like something, but rather than a spider. But yeah, I don't know a lot about them. I've just seen them a lot and talked to Glenn Marangelo from the Butterfly House. He's looked up some information on them.
It is really interesting when you start looking at blue and purple flowers closely. There's a fair number of these rascals. Dee, I know you're on the Zoom tonight. Can you tell us anything about your ascent of this mountain? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, great.
Is led by Eve Wills, who's in the yellow, and we also had Andrea Pip in the purple there, Eve knew a way to get to it where we were following little game trails through the white bark pine forest, which I just loved. So being up in the Flathead, I don't get to see healthy white bark pines much, so I was really excited about just being in this lush forest. And Andrea noticed there were seeds, white bark pine seeds sprouting all through the forest we were going through. So I was thrilled to get to photograph them and in the classic bunches that we expect. And we got up out of the forest into the alpine, which we were not counting on being able to do because the Pioneer Mountains get spectacular thunderstorms. And it was a cloudy day and they were brewing.
And this is a mystery cushion plant, right? Can anyone identify this for us?
I believe it's probably a phlox. Andrea had a good guess which one, but I didn't. We were up there and the weather was so ominous that I didn't take time to try to figure it out.
It seems to be very happy right on that quartzite.
Yeah. Eventually, we heard thunderclaps, and we got out of there so fast. So we did not make the summit.
That's fine. You're here to tell the tale. That's what counts.
I feel very lucky to have gotten up into the Alpine.
In the region of Valley of Flowers, Bozeman, Livingston, Big Timber, to the west all the way over to Ennis. I led this field trip in late May on the Hogback, which is a ridge that runs east-west and penetrates the Paradise Valley about a dozen miles south of Livingston. And it's limestone, and it's very dry, and it flowers quite early. They were not in bloom, but these cacti were pretty spectacular on the lower slopes. It was one of those weird days this year where we had smoke in May from the very distant Canadian wildfires. Those are the Absarokas across the valley. This is kind of the star of the show for that ridge, the Leucocrinum, the star lily. The penstemon didn't seem to need anything in the way of soil. This is a Matt Lavin photo. There were loads of these little butterflies on the miner's candle. And Christy, I think are you on the call tonight? I think you were kind of familiar with these rascals. Not on the call. Also in our area, not very far at all from Bozeman, just a bit to the north, that an area that was burned in the foothills of the Bridgers. 3 years ago, was it? I know that Vicky is on and Beth, of course, is on. Go ahead and tell us about this field trip.
Vicky, are you on here? Do you want to talk about the Bridger Foothills fire a little bit? Well, from my standpoint, so the Bridger Foothills fire happened up in Bridger Canyon 3 years ago now. So it's getting a fantastic regeneration of shrubs in some of the forested areas. It's a really neat mosaic. And Vicky Saab has been monitoring the birds there, as well as the plants, and Matt Lavin and Bruce Maxwell have been monitoring the plants. And so we had a great field trip with all those people in attendance and wandered around, and it was really, really spectacular up there. And we have access to some private property up a private road, and we can get right up there into the heart of the fire and look at some of these meadows, as well as the forests and a bunch of different habitats.
So where you're standing in this photograph, Beth, had that burned over 3 years ago?
Yes.
Wow.
Got another pollinator in there. It's nice.
It is nice.
Yeah.
Oh, another prize break. Since we're in the Yellowstone region, if you would like to contend for this app, get your cursor moving, bring up your icons and type into the chat box.
Oh, good.
Beth, I'm looking at a lot of people typing into the chat box. We should give away a couple or three of these. Okay, moving north, the area covered by the Kelsey chapter in sort of west central Montana. This was an early field trip. And I think this is in the Little Belts, is that right? Connie, are you on the Zoom, or Clara or Matthew, are you on? How about anyone who was on that field trip that day?
Well, this is Connie. I was not the leader, but maybe I'm the only one here.
Yeah. You were the photographer.
I was hoping that you got some pictures from Matt because he's really more of a photographer. But this was a fun trip up in the Little Belts to a couple of huge wildflower meadows. Onion Park was a higher one. This was a lower meadow, and I don't remember the name of it. And Matthew was really interested in these meadow rue that were growing up there. They were really short and very colorful. And he was going to try to investigate which species they were. And so if anyone has any thoughts on that, it would be helpful to know. I wasn't sure if this was possibly a purple meadow rue, but I'm not sure.
They are colorful.
It was still a little early there for wildflowers, but we definitely got to see some, as well as a black bear running through Onion Park. We didn't get a picture of him though.
Can anyone help with this? Micranthes, any ideas about species? It's kind of comforting to know that our experts can't necessarily name every single thing. Okay, moving a teeny bit south and west from the Little Belts to the Big Belts. Here is a hike that was led and photographed by Connie and Andrea Pip. And they have a bunch of wonderful photos. Do you want to, Andrea, you're the lichen lady. Do you want to tell us what you were looking for and what you found? I think you're on. Unmute yourself.
She doesn't seem to be here.
Okay. There's some wonderful lichen photos here.
Yeah, this seems to be sort of a little ecosystem that the lichen really appreciate. And every time we've ever been there, there's always lots of the usnea and wolf lichen, as well as other things. It must be kind of a moist spot.
Yeah, yeah.
Fortunately, it was saved from a lot of the fires that have been up in the Big Belts recently in that area. And there's a nice wildflower meadow. There might be some photos from that too.
I think so, yeah. Boy, I can just smell it. Just from that photograph, I can just smell it.
Yeah, does anyone know anything about what substance that is that creates that strong smell? You know, the chemistry at all?
Robin Klein says it's a resin.
I had to throw the critter pictures in because they were fun.
Oh, yes, yeah. This was an Andrea Pip journey to the Toston area, I guess. Claire, are you on the Zoom, or anyone else who was on this field trip? Mark, I think you were on this field trip. I looked at this picture and I thought, those people are searching everywhere but on the ground. But here's the Spiranthes. And they sent in some pictures of an individual plant that had been grazed on the left, and then an infected rush on the right. And I don't know what it's infected with. I don't know the story of that.
That is considered vivipary, where the flowering parts, something triggered it, cold weather or excess rain or whatever, and it goes vegetative. You find this on mountain brome and alpine timothy and various things, but as far as I could tell, that's a viviparous expression on juncus.
Thank you. Moving to the east, to the areas covered by Eastern at Large and the Maca Flora chapter, I did not receive any slides from the Artemisia chapter. Hopefully next year, if we do this next year, we'll have some Artemisia field trip slides. So the Milton Ranch was censused for plants officially by the Native Plant Society. And Beth took these photographs, and Aaron Clausen, one of the co-leaders. Beth, can you tell us about this trip?
Our longtime esteemed member Wayne Phillips has done a lot of work creating a plant list for the Milton Ranch. But this was a field trip. For those of you who don't know, the Milton Ranch is just north of Roundup in central Montana. And Bill and Dana Milton are longtime Native Plant Society members, and they run an award-winning cattle ranch up there, and they have a big emphasis on regenerative grazing and conservation. So we walked out into this prairie here, and we only had about 2 hours, and we ended up documenting 78 species of native plants in this prairie here. And Aaron Clausen, who works for World Wildlife Fund, was the leader, and Bill Milton came out with us as well. And Kelsey Malloy, who's the Eastern at Large chapter representative, she kind of organized it. And so just a big thank you to the Miltons for sharing this really beautiful prairie with us. A lot of things were in flower because they'd had so much moisture. So it was just really neat to see all these flowering cactus and such.
Oh, this is another one with a pollinator buried deep within the flower.
Yeah, you have to look twice to get by the frilly yellow and see that little, I guess it's a beetle in there.
I think it's a beetle, yeah.
And that cutleaf anemone isn't that common that far east into central Montana, and there was a huge patch of it, and it was all just in beautiful seed there. So that was kind of a treat in the scarlet gara. And we also saw 2 species of toads out in the prairie and a hognose snake. So it's just really outstanding place.
In the Big Snowies, Jim Hansen and Kelsey Malloy led a field trip. Kelsey, are you on the Zoom tonight? Or Jim? Anyone who is on the Zoom who was on this field trip, go ahead and unmute your microphone and tell us about it. This is classic Big Snowies. It's limestone, limestone, limestone. Nobody? Okay. There's a forget-me-not growing out of limestone. Rose crown. Looks like the Jones's columbine was not quite in flower. Moving further east, the Terry Badlands. Fraser, are you on our Zoom tonight? If not, Beth, can you tell us about this field trip?
Yeah, so Terry Badlands are between Miles City and Glendive. So they're just north of the interstate. Terry's right on the interstate. And they're a wilderness study area. And Fraser Watson from the Macaflora chapter got this trip together, and some of us went up the night before and camped out at this overlook. And it's just a really outstanding place. And I will say, if you think about getting out into central or eastern Montana, but don't know the lay of the land, these field trips are a great way to do it, because the leaders out there will tell you, they'll give you directions and tell you where you can camp and stuff. So it's a great way to explore.
That must be as green as it ever is in the Terry Badlands.
Yeah, it was pretty exceptional year. So one of our goals was to look for this pottery or painted vetch, Astragalus ceramicus, and it has these little inflated pods that are just beautifully painted there. So that was pretty cool. And it grows in just, blowouts, sandy, nothing really around. And then this green comet milkweed was another real treat. And this annual buckwheat as well, and the silverleaf scurf pea. So lots of cool plants out there.
And finally, the Chalk Buttes in Carter County, southeastern Montana. Is anyone on the Zoom tonight who took part in this field trip? There are these buttes of sedimentary rock sticking up from the prairie. That, I believe, is the field trip leader getting a close-up. Oh, the last prize break. If you'd like the Montana Grasses app, here are your instructions. So that is all the field trip specific pictures, but folks sent in quite a lot of wonderful people pictures. So I've just put a bunch of them at the end here because it's about the plants, but it's about us enjoying ourselves as well. That photograph on the right was taken at the sculpture park in Lincoln. The Kelsey chapter had a field trip there in March. That was not a summer field trip.
That's one of the natural bridges out at the Terry Badlands. That's Fraser on top there with his field tech Keeley.
Okay, Beth, did you select winners of the apps?
Yes, nice work, everybody. It harkens back to the days when you had to call into the radio station and be the third caller, and it ain't easy, is it? So for the Glacier app, Janet Cass was the winner. The Yellowstone app went to Connie Geiger, and Christy Dubois won the Montana Grasses app. And I'm texting with each of you on whether you need iOS or Android, and it seems like we got that straightened out. So thanks so much.
And that's all for this year, folks. Go ahead and unmute yourself and chat. Was this worthwhile? Does it whet your appetite for next year? How'd you like it?
A lot. Yes, do it again, please.
Yes, great show. Very inspiring. Just wonderful.
Yeah, I missed a lot of good field trips from the looks of things.
Lots of fun.
Beth, I think you can quit the recording now.
Oh, thank you very much. We will stop recording.
How did you put out the call for pictures? Because I had pictures from the native plant meetings, but